GM. How are you doing, Karen?
I'm good. Casey, how are you?
Fantastic. I am in Los Angeles this week, and it's good to get out of the crazy humidity of Hong Kong just for a short.
For sure.
For
Yeah,
sure.
it's a great day here. Get your coffees ready. We are up and early today, and it's gonna be action packed today.
Action-packed show today. We have a huge show. We got two amazing guests, and it's going to talk a lot about character-driven branding and how it affects Web3. And so we're very excited about this. But before we begin, let's hear a quick word from our chairman.
Chairman.
What is discussed on the GM show is not investment advice. We may or may not have ownership interests in the projects we are talking about, but this is not investment advice in any way, shape or form. And this is not Sir David Attenborough.
Yes. If you're new to the show it's all about Asia focus, builder friendly and cool vibes only. That's the ABC of the show. So we're bringing Asia to the world, and we have like some lovely guests today, and hopefully you get something out of it.
Yeah,
And
that's right. We're
yeah.
here to like really educate a lot of the builders. Not only are bringing Asia to the world, we're bringing the world to Asia. I think is another main point I want to say because a lot of these cool projects that are out there, maybe a lot of people don't know about them in Asia. So we're try and bring a little attention, and also what builders are doing now in 2023 in the market when it's not super hot, but there's still a lot of exciting stuff being built here. So let's start with the first segment. We're going to bring up one of the co-founders of a project called The Littles. It's a NFT collection of 10,000 unique NFTs. It was launched in November of 2021, and they are inspired by the wonder of their kids and how their daughter's interaction with the world. So they create these cute little bears. And I guess one of the interesting things about this, and we're going to dive deeper into this question with our main guest as well, is that the Littles, along with Robotos and Toy Boogers, they are also NFT brands. They were all part of Time Magazine's animation studio base new project. They're doing all these animation projects built around NFT stuff. So we want to talk to Will a little bit about that, but also more about the Fun Pass that he just launched recently that's using the Littles brand. So I thought it'd be interesting to see how the Littles NFT are being used for real world projects. So Will is joining us to talk about the Fun Pass. So let's bring up Will. Oh, where's Will?
Hello. Thank you for having me. Your sizzle reel is so incredibly done. It's incredible. One of the best that I've ever been on. It's incredible. So kudos to your team.
Oh, wow. Thanks.
Thanks, Will. Will, you're in Vancouver, Canada right now, my hometown. It's great to have you on the show. Great to see so many amazing projects coming out of Vancouver. Can maybe give the audience a little brief introduction? Like, what is the Littles exactly?
Man, Littles is inspired by my daughter, a 2.5-year-old. When we launched, it was her on top of the slides in the most authentic way. This was also in the midst of all the economic chaos. And so for me, I thought that was my way of being able to bring some rawness, authenticity, simplicity, and joy into the world in the way that I can. I think there's magic there. And that's kind of what inspired us to be able to go out into the marketplace, really show ourselves in the best values that we can. And that really connected with Keith Grossman from Time Studio. And he's like, you know what, Wilson, lean into your strength, lean into you being authentic. And yeah, so that's how we were able to get a partnership with them, became speakers, and just really went ham for the next 2 years. And yeah, that's kind of how we started and where we are.
So what happened to the animation? Is it in production now, or what's happening there?
Man, you know what? A lot of people have been asking me that question. It's with the writers' strike, it has a huge impact with animation, especially within our industry.
Yeah.
We not only did we have a partnership with Time, but we also was being developed by Nelvana, one of the biggest animation studios out there, and everything is on a big pause right now. So honestly, we don't know. We just don't know where things are. Not only us that don't know, but a lot of the different types of animation, whether it's studios and whatnot, everyone is on a big pause. Don't think I'm at liberty of sharing too much behind the scenes, specifically when it's to deal with other production studios. Like,
Sure.
don't know what I can say and cannot say, but like for us, we're just paving a way.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll check back in later. We're gonna have you and Cass come back on the show later and do like a deep dive into the Littles development and what you're doing. But I thought it'd be great to bring you up this week and talk a little bit about the Fun Pass, this new thing that you've done. We have a reel to cut to, but basically tell people, what is the Fun Pass exactly?
Fun Pass is a loyalty application that is for the event space. Think of it as a Starbucks rewards, but for events. And this inspiration really came from a huge struggle that we had. As everyone would know, like being able to build in the Web3 space requires funding. We launched in 2021. We've launched a game. We've launched multiple different initiatives and activation. And yes, of course, we needed more funds to continue to build out this project. So we went out there to try to raise capital, and being able to raise capital for an IP brand is very, very extremely difficult because there's nothing tangible, nothing that you can really scale. It's really a hit-based kind of project.
Right.
And even though we had really great partnerships, great credentials and whatnot, it's still very difficult without a product. So I was looking into what I can leverage within my own background. And me being in business for the last 10 years, we have an event production company. At any given time, we have around roughly 100 staff, and we run the carnival in Vancouver, one of the largest in North America. And so
Which
I'm like, you know what?
Will?
It's it's called the Richmond Night Market.
Richmond
yeah,
Night Market.
That's right. That's right. Over 1 million
That's
attendees
fun.
every single year. So it's incredible. It's something that we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. So that's an incredible achievement. Never had I thought that something that was inspired by my wife, girlfriend at the time, Cassandra, is able to actually, celebrate a 10-year thing that I've been building because of her. And incredible. You can actually see this thing right here. That was in 2013 that we framed it, and it's incredible. Yeah.
Amazing.
And now we're building something which is inspired by our daughter. It's like a full circle moment, and now she's actually quit her job. She's a leadership role at Lululemon, and so she's responsible of scaling a lot of their new market entries, hiring all the entire team, operationalizing everything. And then now I feel like that I have the super booster in our team where she's building this with me full time. And it's an incredible experience being able to work with your partner and be able to raise a family together as well.
Wow, that's amazing. Very bullish on that. That's an awesome story. Okay, so I'm going to bring up the video here now from your thing so people can take a look at it visually.
I love it. I love how it's like
amazing.
It's like a full like journey. Like you can experience like a full journey in an event, and like it's everywhere in the city, and like it's like with the cute little bear. It's very, very nice.
So talk. Okay, so people, if you're listening on Twitter Spaces, you have to go to the YouTube to watch the video. It's quite cool, or just go to the Littles NFT Twitter. They have it's pinned there, so you can see it there, or we'll pin it in the Twitter Space, Karen, if you can do that. But Will, so tell me, obviously, when you launched the NFT project in 2021, you're not thinking about the roadmap. Doesn't say, "Hey, we're going to do this Fun Pass on it," right? This is something that's obviously come out. Yeah, right.
We had no roadmap. Well, for us, like back to the story, I realized I didn't even finish my story about like why we even thought about this, like leveraging and I was just thinking a little bit about like, okay, you know what, I'm not going to sit back, I'm not going to throw in the towel. I understand how business works. I've been in it. I've created multiple different business, 2 different exits. So throwing in the towel is not really in my DNA at all. So we're like, okay, you know what, how can we leverage? I believe in the Web3 tech. I believe in aligned incentives. And I believe that Web3 tech is going to be an underlying feature to how we operate in the future. But how can we utilize this technology to enhance the user experience of businesses that work already in real life? And so with that, I realized that I needed to scratch my own itch. Me being in a carnival environment, the entire user journey is very, very fragmented. What I mean by that is when people attend an event, the experience is very siloed. There's nothing that promotes them to go to this place, that place, and whatnot. There's no incentive for them to take any type of action. And when they partake in activities, there's no rewards. Even then, after the event happens, surveys happen, but there's really no touch point moving forward. So that's what we set out to solve for that problem, which is to create this full cycle, fully integrated type of event platform where people can actually use this platform, get rewards from it, and at the same time, being able to continually engage even after the event, post-event. And yeah, so we set out with this mission and went to work a couple months ago, and now we are live.
That's amazing. I like that you're not waiting for the Hollywood deal to keep going. You guys are building your own destiny and have your own thing going on, and using the night market and an amazing city to kind of build the brand out, which is interesting because I wouldn't think building a brand in Vancouver was like the #1 thing. But right, I mean, we know people travel. I can't get a ticket back to Vancouver from Hong Kong. It's so expensive because everybody must be going back and forth. So whatever's popular in either city is going to catch on for the rest of the world. And we'll ask David about that later. Last quick question on this. What kind of lessons can you share building something like this in 2023, right? We're in the bear market. You guys are building in Vancouver. Maybe you don't hear so much of the noise. You guys stay off, maybe, I don't know if you have a Discord with a crazy community, but how is it building in this year?
Building in this year has been incredible. I think like the #1 lesson is to be able to find partners that can support you. A huge shout out to Near Foundation. They saw our vision out of all the different protocol layers. Like we chose them to partner with because their support is phenomenal. And even in this marketplace, they were able to take bets and the right team with the right founders with the right vision. And so thanks to their support, we're able to continue to build. That's #1. And second of all, being able to build with intention. Right, we're thinking about how can we utilize this technology for real life utilization. And currently we have more than 3,000 signups as users within just 2 weeks of launching, and more than 30,000 transactions on chain. And this is only 2 weeks of launching, and this is just the beginning of this entire application that we're launching. Multiple different events that we have letter of intent already, and just really exciting to be able to see that if and when your intention is right, that you're not thinking about how can I extract more value from this Web3 community, but rather utilizing this technology in the right way, delivering real value in the real world is really the way to go.
Wow, super refreshing to hear that, Will. That's amazing. Karen, do you have any questions about that?
Well, I just think it's very much like you want the journey doesn't feel like it's as seamless as possible, right? So I really like to see projects like this where it's like not not like setting up a wallet or like all this kind of stuff like that preventing people joining in Web3, but this is like a very welcoming way and like has like a full-on experience on it as well. So I really like to see more projects like this.
Yeah, and a final note, I know that we're coming up within my segment. It's crazy how these 3,000 people don't even know they're onboarded in a Web3 powered type of ecosystem. They all have their own wallets. And for us to be able to tinker with the tech to actually support that and to have just to give you some perspective, every night we have more than 10,000 people in through the doors. So the transactions are real time live that people are interacting with it, which makes it so cool to see that it works really well. And not only that, on the back end, that it works really well, on the front end, it actually drives value for the vendors. We have had a survey of more than 1,600 surveys to see whether or not this application actually uplifts the revenue of the vendor.
Yeah.
And it's been proven that it has an uplift of 12%.
Wow.
Amazing.
12%. So in any type of carnival, I would say easily it's a 7-figure operation in terms of revenue. So we can already see its direct tangible impact, that an application that we've created and launched for 2 weeks without major tweaks has such a big lift already, is so promising for us that we're like, wow, this is incredible. So anyways, that's I'm sharing based on passion, nothing to shield, nothing to sell, nothing to mint.
That's
so
why we
just throwing it
invited
out there.
Yeah.
Last quick question. Where can we get some of that merch? In the video, I saw that you guys can redeem for Little's merchandise.
You can win them on the.
You can win them with the application. Shop.thelittles.io is the way that you get some merch. We're having our season 3 merch drop real soon, actually within next week. So definitely keep your eyes open for that. Some big collabs coming up. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Will. Thanks for coming on. We'll see you again soon. Take it easy. Have a great rest of your summer.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you, Karen. Talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Amazing, right? That's pretty cool.
Great.
I love that. I love that stuff.
Very refreshing. Yeah.
All right. Before our next interview, Karen, what do we have?
Well, we have a sponsor, and it's going to be related to our guest later. So here's our sponsor.
The GM Show is not sponsored by Ugly Doll. Ugly Doll is a brand and series of plush toys created by Sunmin Kim, based on an idea by Kim and her husband David Horvath. The Ugly Dolls were created in 2001 and included Babo, Cinco, Ice Bat, Jiro, Ox, Target, Trey, Wage, Wedgehead, and many more doll characters. The Ugly Doll line was launched on February 14, 2001, and was awarded the Specialty Toy of the Year award by the Toy Industry Association in 2006.
Yeah, and that's not Morgan Freeman. But yeah, if you have any, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, please let us know and we'll bring it on in the special way. But this is a great intro to our guest.
It's such a great intro. I wrote that as an intro, but you actually made it into like an animation thing. So that's amazing. So, I mean, Ugly Dolls came out almost 20 years. They started almost 20 years. Do you remember that? Were you old enough to remember when it first came out?
Well, I've seen it everywhere in the bookstore in Hong Kong. And I remember I was like, when I first saw it, I was like, what a weird looking toy, like a doll. But I was like, well, this is something really special. And I think it was like a Korean, well, I thought it was like it is a Korean based brand. And I was like, wow, this is really, really refreshing for a toy brand. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I had it in my office in Hong Kong and people would come in and go, what an ugly doll. I'm like, guess what it's called? So I thought it was good. And it was also, it came out at a time, I guess, when there's a lot of art toys were coming out. And so I thought it was one of the first plush ones. A lot of them were coming out as like plastic vinyl and those kind of things. I think Bear Bricks and those things started around that time as well. So that character brand was not only owned by Japanese companies like Sanrio. There's like other companies doing it. So it's very exciting. So like you mentioned already, Sunmin Kim and David Horvath created it together. It's a very lovely story how they started it before they got married, but they got married and then they built out the brand. It's I don't know, it's a mega brand, right? It's been licensed around the world.
And toys today.
What's that?
It's all about love story and toys. I love how couples doing all these like adventure and business together. It's like a episode full of love.
Yeah, and because I guess David and Sunmin, they started earlier, they have their own movie already, while Will is still waiting for his movie to come out. It's kind of blurring the background, but it's on Netflix right now, the Ugly Dolls movie that came out a couple years ago now. We can see it. But it's changed so much. It's evolved over time. But the main point of this episode is not to do a history on toys. It's to do with David's Substack. So David does an amazing Substack where he really drills down on building brands with Web3. Now, I think this is the most important thing. A lot of people have been asking us, to bring on more people, talk more about IP, how to monetize some of these Web3 brands. Yeah. And David's been watching it very carefully. He's worked with a lot of brands, and he'll talk more about and we'll show a lot of cool other stuff that he's working on in the Web3 space. So he understands it. But I mean, this guy has launched all these brands. He's worked in Asia, which is also very important. He's done a lot of stuff in Japan and Korea, obviously, and Hong Kong, as we've talked about. But I also want to ask him, that's why I'm very excited to have him on the show. I've been following his career for ages. I think it's super exciting to talk about. So let's just get to it, and let's bring him up on the stage.
That is a dramatic intro. Very nice,
David.
David's bigger than the world. That's why.
That's wonderful. Excellent work. I love the not a commercial. The non-commercial.
We're not paid.
Someday get authentic version. Someday we'll work on
it. David, before we get into all the stuff about Web3, I've just recently saw the Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem movie. I know that you've seen it too. Nickelodeon, who owns the Ninja Turtles, also you've worked with them as well. But I saw on your Twitter thread you talked a lot about it. What did you think of the movie? And where's all their NFTs and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, of course, I went to go see it right away. Nickelodeon Extended Family, our Bossy Bear children's book series from back in 2007, which was originally published through Disney, was our best-selling plastic toy line for 15 years or so, and just premiered on Nick Jr. and Nickelodeon both this last March. And so, by default, we knew that Brian Robbins, who heads up, Nickelodeon and the Paramount, this was a big deal, and for a big deal for me especially. I'm obsessed with character brands, whether they come from the toy universe or the story-driven side, or the specialty business where we mostly operate, like the Hello Kitty world. And they're all very different. They're all completely different approaches, and sometimes you can kind of transcend from one being your birthplace and then end up in an entirely different business, like how Snoopy started as a comic newspaper strip and now is toe-to-toe with Hello Kitty and Pokemon and Totoro for women, right? Which is the primary consumer of character culture. So I've been obsessed already. And what I was really watching with Turtles is they've been around, right, over decades. I think it was 1984. I remember getting the first comic book in black and white at Heidi Ho Comics in Santa Monica. The toys 3 or 4 years after that, I found them at Graffiti Comics in Westwood in Los Angeles. And it was this underground thing that, right, once the cartoon launched, I forget who it was. It wasn't Nelvana, but one of those 80s production houses. And man, it just took off like crazy. But then since its first round, where the play pattern started to sort of wear its welcome and the trends in comics kind of changed. So they've had to reinvent themselves quite a few times. And some of those times have not been that successful. It's a really hard thing to do. All brands are tremendously fragile. I can't even imagine. Like I read so many comments about, oh, I made Star Wars postcards at Comic-Con and I got a mean letter from Lucasfilm and they're the evil company. It's like, well, they're not evil. It's like whether you are an indie little like comic book writer or Lucasfilm, your brands are equally as fragile. Really, like so fragile. And so they're sending you that letter not because you took some of their cash and they want to, it's because if their brand or your brand or anyone's brand appears in the wrong place too many times in our minds, in our subconscious, we fall out of love with them. It's just the way it works, and it always works that way. So Ninja Turtles, I was really paying attention to what was going to happen. They kind of went really all out creatively. Like if you look at on Twitter and you follow all the illustrators, the sound designers, the colorists, something very different was happening, and there was a certain level of pride in the work that was always there with the previous projects, even after the Nickelodeon Viacom acquisition.
Right.
But man, there was something very special about this that I was really pulling for it. So I was very happy that they passed their projections. Not just happy for the company, that they get to keep the lights on, so maybe we can keep working a little longer. But to watch a brand that old and to go through the path that they have been on specifically, to be able to kind of rise again like this. And this is going to propel the shows for sure happening now. I'm sure the second movie is, they announce these things, but most things that are announced are not made ever. That's just the nature of the beast, right? Like I was saying in the green room, we've only had 2 shows on the air. We had an NHK show in Japan 20 years ago, and then we had Bossy Bear on TV now. But we've always had TV shows in development, like for the last 25 years, and have been very fortunate to be able to do so. That's sort of like the default setting, to be developing things if you're really lucky, and then getting on the air is kind of like the weird, like outlier occurrence that happens just by chance, right? It's not the norm.
Yeah.
Just thinking about like everything that was working against Turtles, and then to see them, do what they did felt great.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And then I just want to quickly touch, because Will was just here before we get into it, and he there's this quote I have here from Kidscreen Magazine, which is a trade magazine for the kids industry, and basically it says Kidcos have started turning to NFTs for TV and film inspiration because they offer a new avenue for discovering IP, have an existing audience, and are collectible by nature. This is what producers are telling Kidscreen Magazine. I think this was last year, or whenever those time studio deals are done. You also have a deal, right? You have an animation deal with Imagine Entertainment, I think, one of your other NFTs. What do you think about all this? Is this really a place for, are they just jumping on the bandwagon when it was super hot, or do you think they're actually going to fulfill a lot of these deals?
Well, a lot of those announcements did come out at the same time. We were already working with Ron Howard and Brian Grazer's Imagine on our Bossy Bear show.
Yeah.
And of course, we were just 24/7 with them at that point, as far as getting Bossy Bear, to greenlight. I think it was greenlit around the time that announcement came out. And so I was the one that actually told everybody in the company about NFTs, like right when the Beeple story hit, the one that got everybody involved at a large scale. And it was just so unbelievable to them. It was equally still as unbelievable to me. I found out about it from my friend Craig, who runs Sanrio in the USA. He's like, hey, Dave, you know how you've always wanted to make originals available of your digital art, but like how your wife hangs amazing paintings on the wall and sells them and you can't because it's like digital. Well, now you can do that. Now you can sell an original. And I was like, I'm going to hang up now. Stop teasing. That's not nice. You should, I would, but he was serious. And I took a look, and he showed me Nifty Gateway, that website, Nifty Gateway, that led me down this, we all went down the rabbit hole at some point. And then that led me to running to Imagine and saying, you guys got to see this. And I went through the whole thing. And I was already minting stuff and gaining an entirely new following, as our Bossy Bear and Ugly Doll fans, which are in the millions around the world. One of them wanted anything to do with NFTs, and the others just somehow didn't want to make that leap, right? So we kind of built an entirely new audience, which then became, great friends, and it became kind of a close-knit community, which is what a lot of this is really all about and what it has led to. Mm-hmm. And the first time that I actually used social media in a way that is social, where I'm actually having a connection with people, whereas they kept saying we were going to make connections, it was actually happening on, crypto Twitter or NFT Twitter.
Yeah.
Right.
So we did a development deal with Imagine, and we're still working on it. And I don't think it's jumping on the bandwagon. It is the job of everyone in development to, like, 20 years ago, you mentioned we came up with the designer toy craze, right? Which is still very much going on, in China and Hong Kong and extended territories with Pop Mart, right? I mean, they flipped Mattel's market cap by 2 times, I think, a couple of years.
Yeah.
But what we saw happen in Web3, and actually what's happening right now, we've seen the exact same thing transpire in the designer toy community. Like in the toy world that we came up in. Like, even where we've had our own blue chips, we've had our Bored Ape was like Michael Lau and Eric So, and we've had our Bats was like Pete Fowler, Monsterism, and like the same heroes at the same magnitude kind of rose up in the same way. And back then we attracted the attention of Disney, Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network. They came by, anytime you kind of break through that culture attention membrane, it's the job of everyone working in development in the animation world to kind of, poke at those who are sort of peeking out and or appeal to them. And hey, we want to, could you pitch some stories to us? And then they, by default start to put some projects in development. I certainly hope that the ones that are in development with time get all the way to air. I'm sure they will. But if you Google Kid Robot Paramount Pictures, like Kid Robot did a Paramount Pictures movie deal back in like 2007, and everyone's like, "Oh my God, there's going to be a Kid Robot movie." And it's like,
right.
Well, but if we're familiar with how it works, it's like, no, this was very amazing. Like, this is incredible for them that they've got something in development. But we had Ugly Doll was a Cartoon Network show in like 2004, and we were with like Sam Register and Linda Saminsky, like the masters of the animation universe, right?
Right.
That turned into being a movie with Illumination. We were like their second or third project early on in the company's history, and which was like, that's where we learned everything there is to learn about the animation business and telling stories. And of course, then that turned into the announcement with STX and Robert Rodriguez, which then some version of that actually made it through by some miracle.
But we saw it co-financed by Alibaba.
Yes, that's when that's originally it was Robert Rodriguez was the writer director.
Wow.
We actually moved away from. We kept our place in South Korea, but we came down to Texas so that we could be close to him. And then the actual animation company that was doing it at the time, Real FX, was also in Dallas. So everything was we wanted to make sure to actually physically be there. And then when Alibaba came along, that's when we had moved on and started work on the Bossy Bear TV show, actually, right, like that same week.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, so animation is it's an amazing, if you can just get one meeting at one major studio in your lifetime, it's a miracle. And it's incredible to have these experiences. I wouldn't hang my financial hopes on announcements, but I think that this is really good information for everyone to have, that it's a very normal part of the process, and you can't get to air without the first development, right? But if you look at how many shows go into development and are announced versus how many come out, it's right. It's a very normal, like the Illumination Ugly Doll movie was the best movie we never made. Like, I saw how it got. I can never talk about it ever, but it's one of the greatest things I've ever worked on, and I still smile when I think about it. I wouldn't trade that for anything. I told Founder, I would rather work with you and not have a movie come out than have the wrong movie come out. It no longer was the point. And I think that's when I also learned, if you have a character brand, it should never be the thing that you think you need. Like, you should never need a show, and you should be very careful to never have to need a show to come out. Right? Our show, our movie, was the same as our wind-up toys, our tin toys, our Random House book. This is really important, that you're directing a brand that, hopefully you're reaching to achieve what we call evergreen ubiquity. Yeah. Because it is a choice. It's a choice to try your best to make something that's going to outlive you, something that can last decades or 100 years. And it's not something that just happens because things are popular and everyone loves them. It's a very specific path. And there's really nothing wrong with taking the 4 to 7 year path either, because that puts food on the table for yourself, for your employees, and it's in a very different strategy. It's one that, you should have the next thing ready by year 5 or so. But that's a completely separate set of skills and other take, and it's just as valid. Specifically, we, for us, have decided to, put all of our effort into evergreen ubiquity, the desire to attempt to achieve that anyway, because, you know, there's no real way to know that you've succeeded in it until you're 90.
Right. That's the name.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I love how you tweeted 2 days ago that your booth said, with the presentation said achieved without Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and I love how you interpret that as like, like you don't need that, and you don't need a show, and you don't need all those things. But what's your take on, like, what's the learnings with this, like? It's actually very powerful without social media, and you still succeed.
Especially with meme land, and a lot of NFTs require that, or otherwise it doesn't go
and
anywhere.
a lot of IPs, like in the NFT worlds, like they all started in the social media. So, like, let's talk about that.
Oh, of course. Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, approach at all. It just depends on what your goals are and what business you're actually in, right? So, like, my friend's uncle has a hardware store, and he had a hardware store doing this many dollars a year, and then he went to Facebook, and then he did he utilized the tools that is social media, and now he's doing much better, right? And that demographic that he appeals to, and the people who are local around town, go to his place instead of Lowe's or Home Depot, and it really does work, right? But when you're building a character brand, especially in your formative years, there's something very different happens when you start from a place of people discovering you versus you broadcasting outwards. And you may be broadcasting outwards the most incredible, delicious, unavoidable, yummy thing there is in the world, right? But it in general, and there's always outliers that then render what I'm saying completely, nonsensical. But in general, you should probably avoid marketing to culture and instead focus on becoming one with it. That if your goal is to take on Hello Kitty, to take on Moomin, and occupy the same space as a Miffy or a Rilakkuma, or on the story-driven side, a Star Wars, or a Barbie. Many people see the Barbie movie and they say, "Oh man, it's huge," and the top 5 people from Mattel will hear this and go, "No, Dave's crazy. He's always been crazy." But this movie saves them from themselves. Like, this was not for Barbie. This was for Mattel. They are desperately trying to transcend their birthplace. Like, Barbie and Mario were in the same place. Mario's brand was up when the hardware sales were up. The hardware sales were up, the software sales were up. But the Wii U, it's not fair that you would have the Wii U. What if the next console is not a hit? What happens to the Mario brand? These Nintendo brands are way too important and powerful to leave to the dynamics of hardware sales. Just as the Barbie brand is way too important for Mattel historically, now getting into how old it is,
right,
to leave it to the dynamics of toy retail is just, you can't do that. So this movie was a major vehicle for them to transcend their birthplace, as the Mario movie was, as Snoopy is no longer a Christmas special, or for kids at all, right? It's for women in their 40s. So is Pokemon. We're in the middle of the Pokemon transition where kids are like, "What are you talking? What did you just say about Pokemon? You're insane." Like, my brother loves the game, but that shrinking percentage of their revenues going towards video games and cards just shrank more while I'm on this big rant with you here, right? And 90% of those sales were all in the US. So yes, they're still kids, but 15 years from now, I mean, when you go look at who's actually buying Pokemon and what they're actually selling, it's a lot of like aprons and bags and jewelry and mugs.
Older people stuff, right?
Yeah, horrible older people stuff. You can argue, well, you go into the Pokemon Center, it's half plush, you're out of your mind. It's like, well, yeah, but half of Sanrio's revenues are plush. That's not kids, and they're not making toys, right? It's, there's a lot.
We got a lot to digest there. We got a lot of pictures. We got some great pictures from the history of the whole thing, And I guess we just want to kind of walk through some of them and quickly and just talk about like, how this might come into the Web3 thing, right? I believe, is this a shot from licensing show 1 year?
Yeah, we've been doing the licensing show since 2007. Originally, it was at the Javits Center in New York City, and then I think it's been in Vegas for the last.
Vegas, right? And we know our friends at Pudgy Penguins, they were exhibiting there this year, so they're coming out with their big brand. And maybe Cool Cats is out there, a couple of things. So, how do youth see this? Is this a place? I don't know if they're going out there telling everybody they're an NFT. I think they're going out there just showing that they have a cool looking character and they have a community behind it. They don't, and maybe there's a TV show or a game or something coming out. Like, do you think this is an effective place to go for NFT brands to kind of try and talk to mass market or licensees? Is this something that it's like those brands are doing? Are they right to do it now? Should they wait? Or like, what's your experience in that? And what do you think?
We started in our first year back in February.
Oh, okay.
Wow. I think it was summer 2003 when we first started going. And we literally went there to say no to everybody. Like, we went there for the first 6 years was specifically to say no, but the right kind of no, not just no, but we want to know you. Like, the Walmart guy comes in the booth and we want to use that opportunity to get to know him, knowing he's going to be at Target or she's going to be at Barnes & Noble, or, we're going to stay in the industry and we want to get to know everyone. And the guy who makes the umbrellas, who applies the Hello Kitty license to his umbrella or Blue's Clues to his umbrella, he was grateful that we were doing this approach, right? Because he wants to sign properties that are going to be there by the time the factory rolls out these umbrellas.
Oh, interesting.
And so we went there to say no, and we went there to learn so that eventually we could make the right yes.
Right.
All brands live by the power of no, right? And so that they can make the right yes. So in the first year, we went and said no to everybody, and there weren't that many. We just got off a toy fair, and we were in like Giant Robot magazine, and purposefully keeping it quite small. I mean, we were existing in specialty like the MoMA gift shop, and all of the Better Museum gift shops, Giant Robot, Kid Robot, like super high-end specialty, avoiding any toy store. In fact, we wouldn't enter a toy store for 12 years from that point, but we went every year. And then I think by our second year, we added Chronicle Books, did a really adorable set of stationery and sticker sheets and envelopes and paper goods that were very high quality, and that didn't go to the mass market, right? They went to the sorts of shops that we went to, that we were existing in, because we wanted to be a source of discovery for people. That, if you're a toy brand, you do want to go straight to Walmart and Target, even if there's zero awareness, because you're not really a character brand. You're a toy that's existing through a combination of play patterns and design. Whether you're LOL Surprise, right? LOL Surprise, no one knew what LOL Surprise is, and then suddenly MGA puts them on the shelf. And the play pattern was unboxing, right? You're trying to unravel this doll that's in layers of things that you're taking out. And that was the play pattern, right? With like a dress play pattern, and once you get to the doll part. And the design, like how much cooler it looks than the Barbie equivalent next to you, right? And then that's how toys live and die, and they live that way, and they can be what we call brand adjacent, where Bratz or LOL Surprise even, right? When you go to Target right now, there's LOL Surprise, the toy, there's the fashion doll, but then they have T-shirts and lunch boxes. Back to school right now, there's the backpacks. Yep. Those will exist until the play pattern wears its welcome, and then those things are just gone instantly. So it looks like a character brand, it walks like a character brand, it talks like a character brand, but really it's brand adjacent. It's a toy brand, and it lives and will die according to its play pattern. Whereas something like Cool Cats, or I don't know what direction they're taking, but Doodles or Hello Kitty, these are like Hello Kitty specifically, is a lifestyle character brand, and it doesn't really, for Hello Kitty specifically, they've now learned, don't make a show. It's not for kids. don't get an end cap at Toys R Us anymore. And you know, quite literally is for adults and lives and thrives through completely different dynamics than like the third category, which is story-driven character brands like SpongeBob or anything on Nickelodeon or anything on the bookshelf like Dogman from Daft Pinkley or the guy who did Camp the Underpants or, you know, the Pigeon books by Mo Willems, right? Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
Completely separate dynamic. So whether you want to be story-driven, lifestyle, or a toy brand, these are very different approaches in very different businesses, and
Yeah.
not at all the same.
I wanted to see that. I love this picture. I guess Hugh Jackman was at one of the toy shows.
Found our little shop in South Korea.
Oh wow!
And I guess he was already a fan. I know he was buying our stuff at a shop in New York back then called Yo-Yo Mart. I've never met him, but we would hear from the owner we were close with. That's where he picked up all our stuff. He had another tweet where he had a big Bossy Bear toy in the background, just on a bookshelf somewhere.
Interesting.
But I couldn't believe that he actually went into our store and tweeted about it.
Amazing.
That's
Wolverine days with his hair, with his giant beard.
Yeah. I think they really were filming a scene in South Korea for Wolverine at that time.
Amazing. Okay, so let's this is fascinating. I don't know. I don't collect Hello Kitty, so I just assumed it was for kids. But now you mentioned it's true. A lot of my friends who are older actually buy a lot of this stuff, and so I want to talk a little bit about your entry into the Asian market because, you know, like Karen said, she sees it in the bookstores in Hong Kong, at the Ugly Dolls, but I also seen it in like these gachapon machines as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And then I see you did a crossover with Hello Kitty, and she's wearing one of the Ugly Doll outfits. Talk a little bit about how did these things happen? You know, because it's not very American looking. I guess it's easier to is it easier to get into the Asian market as an Asian? If you guys see yourself as an Asian brand, like how does it fit?
Well, you have to kind of be lucky with where you are in the wave of the market dynamics, because sometimes it's really important for you to not be kawaii or look like anything like from, you know, like right now, the big thing right now is like hand sketchy, illustrative. Like, do you know the brand Moomin from the Nordics? Really, it's not even the Japanese.
Huge.
Like Moomin goes up and down, you know, but has been absolutely huge, right? In Japan, and they've done the right things in Japan to then have influence in, you know, surrounding territories. They've been very smart about everything. They are what we call the right small, you know, where they will most certainly live forever. But her, that brand, Bridge Ship House, which is she's more like a 30s comic book illustrative look, very non-cutie. So we're seeing a lot of illustrative, funky, non-cutie culture stuff pop up. Especially now, there's a major downtrend in character consumer goods in general, which happens every 20 years, which presents a great opportunity, like for founders and for people who are just now getting into the character IP world. It's like it's about to be the best time to get in, without question.
How does a Hello Kitty and an Ultraman crossover happen? Do you have agents out there? How does this work?
So originally, 20 years ago, we had a show on NHK, which was for children, called Little Boney, and it was a preschool property. It was a little skeleton that's on every weekday morning, and it was like on the first thing in the morning on NHK for kids. That like he teaches you how to stretch to get ready in the morning. Very simple, very basic. And that was a combination of NHK and produced by Sony Creative Products. So Sony did all the consumer products and licensing, which they are a master at, and they're now, you know, they've risen Snoopy from the dead after that movie in 2015, and just done a phenomenal job. But they handled consumer products and licensing, and I learned everything there was to learn at the time from them, while learning everything I could learn at the time from NHK on the broadcast side and animation side. And Sony also had a boy band 20 years ago called Uverworld. And so they said, hey, we love what you did with Little Boney. We would love to, sorry. Watch your fingers. We would love to have you do this band's first album cover and create kind of like a mascot character for him, right? For them. So right after Little Boney came out, we were in all the record stores and our character was dancing all over the Shibuya, that big crosswalk thing with the giant jumbo screens, and just being in town and going to all these events where a lot of creators from that realm would come out. We just pretty much met everybody under the sun in those, in those formative years, and spent as much time as we could on the ground. And while we were doing those projects, I made it a point to absorb the entire Japanese market, and then how the Japanese market was influenced by and also had influence on the surrounding territories, South Korea and, in Taiwan, in Singapore, Hong Kong a little bit. From that we got an art show with Benetton. Benetton had a gallery in Hong Kong called Fabrica Features maybe 20 years ago, and somehow we got some big art show through that we did, and then got into Superman toys and learned where all like the cool underground vinyl figures were. And
in Mongkok. Karen, have you been to that shop, Superman toys in Mongkok?
Right.
Of
Oh,
course.
it's crazy. There's all these malls around Mongkok where it's all toys.
Yeah,
we've
I'm
done
always
it
there too.
We've wrapped several major department stores in mainland China, thanks to like tiny little stuff that we would do in Hong Kong that I assumed that most people wouldn't see. And there, and especially in Japan and Korea, is where we learned that doing big stuff, and I think it's still true for Web3 in general, that I understand that there's a thirst for big things to happen and for things to move along quickly. But if I'm getting in now, knowing what I know, I'll pick up pieces from various collections because I believe that they're going to take 20 years to do what they need to do. I would look for that first. Like,
Yeah.
do they know how to do that? Do they know why they would do that? And then are they maybe even considering taking that route versus getting in everyone's eyeballs and getting just mass awareness? I would really worry about, in general, there's outlier cases, but I would probably stay away from anything that's actively seeking eyeballs. Just, for me, just based on how I've been living in this world. And I'm most certainly not the master of the universe when it comes to Web3, and I'm still learning.
Right.
But
Sure.
But many young creators come to us and they're discouraged because they think they've missed a boat. They don't have VCs signed up, and they don't have $19 million in funding to back what they're up to, and they think that they're lacking or they're behind. And so my message to them has been, you're most certainly not behind. You could say you're ahead. There's something that happens when you answer to investors. You can't go to them and say, hey, I just want to be on 7 shelves in 3 countries using 3 products, and that's all we do for 20 years.
Yeah.
Which of course it wouldn't happen, but like that slow build could be misunderstood as being the slow build, which it isn't. I don't recommend anyone take a slow build or go the slow route. There's so much to do on this slow route. You have to do, instead of like one big thing shipping to Walmart and then one big thing shipping to the dollar store, you need to be doing thousands of things, which are equally as difficult and require the same amount of attention. So it's definitely not small. It's just chopped up into thousands of culture microtransactions.
You mentioned Shibuya. So there's a big department store there called Parco. And you've also mentioned, $19 million in VC investment. What those two things equal in my mind is the doodles.
Oh yeah,
And,
well, so I actually gave advice to another friend who does have backing, and I think they were going to make, the financial part was for making something that would take several years to produce, and so I said, well, no, it's actually not really that bad. You could just, while you're going to be working on that thing, and that's 2 years of your head down, 3 years of your head down. So during that time, why not build a character brand and use these techniques of the very slow, careful build? It doesn't really cost very much, other than time. It costs a tremendous amount of time. But why not do that? I think I even wrote a Substack about that, right? That these projects that have a show coming out in 3 years, or that they're making a movie and that's going to take 3.5 to 4 years to do, don't just be quiet for that amount of time. Why not build up that brand so that by the time this thing comes out, you're already at some point in culture, whether it's even at the very underground. To have that history could become a very valuable component.
So the doodles are, I mean, I saw this recently from your tweet. I think a lot of the stuff that they've just talked about now is actually pumping their floor price. But the idea that they're going to do something in with the Parco department store, which if you don't know Japan, you do. There's a significance to being exhibiting in there. I know in the States they're doing something with some other brand, some kids brand, big brand here. Is this the right time for them? I mean, they've been quiet, you know, there's a whole thing going on with them, but you know, now they're popping out with all these things. But maybe talk about your instant reaction to seeing Doodles showcasing in Japan in one of the big department stores.
Parco is, I mean, Parco has become something, you know, far greater than when we first had our stuff in there. But even when we first appeared in Parco, just for the locals, they were like, oh, it just automatically took on a different meaning at that moment. Because that store means something to people. Like how I was saying before, when you walk into the MoMA, a design store, you know, in Lower Manhattan, you don't feel the same way as you do when you walk into a Costco. There's a certain feeling that you have, right? And for us, I was like, of course I feel different. It's the MoMA. What are you talking about? But for some people, they're like, oh, I love this lamp and this crazy hamburger thing, and you know, they're in love with this place. The way my uncle's in love with the comic book shop around the corner, right? There are places that just carry meaning for us, and we assign that meaning to that which we discover there. And that Parco carries meaning, you know, at the local level. But now, I mean, it's huge. If you just stand there, which I do all the time, and I do right when they open, and especially now that Japan has opened up again in regards to tourism, that is such an important place because so many of the visitors and tourists think that that's an important place, right? Like it's aspirational. They go in there thinking, oh, this place is huge in Japan, whereas it is. But like a lot of these places in Korea where they visit and assume they're huge, my friends have never heard of it, but it's somehow taken on the, you know, the glow of this is one of the places, right? Where whatever you find here, that means there must be something interesting going on. So being found at Parco, especially for something like Doodles that automatically is just attractive and works as an attractant on its own, that's very powerful. If then they're able to follow up with something. I learned being at Parco, and then you don't do this and sit back. It means here you go, and you've got to have hundreds and then eventually thousands of other similar and equally as culturally important little mini steps to kind of follow up. And if you want to have things like, you know, if you're doing Parco here, you want to eventually make sure that you're doing something in other territories so that when you're on your travels, you go, oh my God, we just saw these over there. And you create a brand story, you know?
Yeah. Interesting. Before we bring on Ray to ask some more questions, you posted today on your Substack, which everybody should check out. It's called davidhorath.substack.com. Very easy to find. Your headline is, "There's no Asia market. Tokyo impacts NYC more than NYC does." Wow, what a headline to write. I read it. I love it. Maybe you can talk a little bit about it to the audience.
Oh, sure. Well, it's more cautionary for those who are, you know, maybe young and getting into Web3. And a lot of the, I don't want to call them influencers, but those who you end up hearing on a daily basis have started to refer to the Asian market. And that's you have to be careful because there's kind of, especially in regards to IP or character IP, and the IP that a lot of these projects are based on, that's going to be the wrong approach. Even in the Japanese market, there are, like discovering what Parco is, there are thousands of little culture touch points that will be critical. And if you just think that you can blanket, you know, if I went to, like I was telling you before, when we went to Taiwan, or Korea, if we just dumped everything at Toys R Us, for example, that's run by Lotte, it's huge. Whereas Toys R Us is shut down in the States, Lotte's control of Toys R Us is impeccable. But if I put everything at Toys R Us, no one would know. Like they would return it. It wouldn't work, right? Because why would it? I go to Toys R Us for things that I'm already in love with or discover toys, which we are not. Even though we were making toyetic things, we were never a toy brand. So be very careful about thinking of it as the Asian market. That's like saying the North American market, whereas you could be very specific and do certain things that turn you into Supreme in New York City or not, right? So it's think about cities and then where in the city, and really start to get to know each territory, each country, and then try to immerse yourself in, the cultural variance of like block by block, really, if it's possible to do so. With the yen versus the dollar, I recommend, now's a good time.
Oh, then one more thing was that a picture I just looked at was the Nouns. You're doing Nouns vinyl figures, right?
Yeah.
Is that in conjunction with the Nouns DAO, or what is that project? And I heard, I don't know, I saw your tweet or I heard it. You said they're sold out and you're missing out on.
Yeah, I was horrified. Yeah, so we for the last 20 years we've been making Sofubi toys at our factories in Tokyo. Sofubi is like here's Sofubi by Kaori Hinata, and here's an unpainted one that we did of an Ugly Doll figure. They're made in Japan in these tiny factories that, to many, these factories are considered like hallowed ground. Like there's a certain culture around Sofubi that goes way beyond toys. It's kind of adjacent to the designer toy thing a little bit.
Yeah.
These are the factories that were making all the Godzilla monsters as far back as when the first movies came out, and a lot of them were remnants of when toys from Japan were made in Japan before the big 1994 switch to Thailand factories. They kept those shops open for prototyping and for like sample painting. And we've been making our toys there, as we've been selling millions of Bossy Bears and Ugly Dolls. That which balances the big stuff, we've always focused on then doing really minimal, like we'll make 100 of this thing.
Limited edition stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just because they're small quantities, but that even the plastic, you can't have access to this plastic anywhere else in the world except for these places. I've tried with our very best factories in China and in Thailand. There's just no way. And
Wow.
those who know, they look at it and they go, "Oh yeah, this isn't Sofubi. You made this." You'll know right away. So, and then where they are found, there's like a whole culture of where you buy them new, and then like right now we have toys at the Mandarake in Shibuya for sale. In that the whole toy store is just used toys, right?
Yeah.
That's like church, in that world. So you like to find your stuff available used at the Mandarake, especially the one in Shibuya, or at the Nakano, Broadway one, or the one in even the complex one, the big black building with the deadly stairs. They that means something, all right? And if you have a friend of mine was like, "Yeah, but who's going to see that, man? 17 people are going to see that." Like, that's true.
Right.
But
right.
And another 17 people see something equally as incredible that you did somewhere else, and you're doing thousands of these little things. And then cumulative over years, you've told a brand story that I could never tell at Walmart or Kmart or Toys R Us or any, Target. Never.
Yeah.
So how do you get into these places that's the trick. It's like the museum stores in America. You need to just get into one. If you can get into the MoMA, and then you set up a little table at the museum store in Colorado, all the other little museum stores are going to want you. Oh, you're at the MoMA? And there's more museum stores than there are like McDonald's, right? They each have their own buyer. It's harder than shipping to Walmart, but you can technically be in more stores than Walmart and never go mass. So Japan is the same way. You just need to get into one, and then being in the right one, everyone else is hyper aware and looking at what everybody else is carrying. We wanted to be at the Tower Records in Shibuya desperately. So we found
the last one in the world.
Yeah, the last one in the world. So, but 20 years ago, the Shibuya Tower was like, that was it. That's where the buyer from Kittyland looked to get his ideas. So we found out that the buyer from Shibuya Tower is in love with Barney's New York. Back then, Barney's New York was like the big deal where you buy Prada bags or whatever expensive t-shirt. So we ran over to Barney's New York and we said, we'll give you the first 100 Ugly Dolls for free. And from that point, you can have them at a discount for a certain amount, but you got to put them in the window. And she's like, all right, I'll put them there. Are you serious? You're going to give me these for free? I'll put them in the window. Like, you got to keep them in the window for like a weekend. And then so we were taking pictures and like with the timestamps on different days. So it didn't look like we just, and then we put them in, what's the there was like a funky toy magazine that guy just goes to religiously, like where he would write about that in other magazines about how he loves this one toy magazine. I think it was called Quanto or something. So we then had to get the picture of that window from Barney's into that magazine. And then the tower buyer freaked out, right? And then that's how
wow.
Amazing.
And then
Story.
So you got to find those little funny things, and that's enough to melt your ear. But those things are still everywhere. The Japanese market is the greatest white space when it comes to growing the entire world if you're into the character IP market.
Yeah, we know that. Being in Hong Kong, we know that Japan is a filter for the rest of Asia. Even if it's cool in Japan, it usually trickles down to the rest of Asia as well. So we know that, and it's interesting to see that it's also a filter for the rest of the world as well now. So very interesting. David, all this stuff you've talked about is so interesting to me. I feel like I hope people are listening can see the parallel with Web3, with NFTs, because there's always such a rush to get things going, to make it big. Seeing floor prices rise when there's animation or game announcements. These things don't happen overnight. They take a long time. But I feel like everybody who supports communities, whatever community it may be, Meme Land or Doodles, whatever, that you are also like supporting a vision, hopefully a vision by the founders that are on there. Speaking of founders, it's time for Founder to Founder.
These are great clips.
There he is, Ray Chan. Ray, how's it going, GM?
Good, yeah. But before I start, right, I want to ask why is that the Breaking Bad scene in Founder to Founder? What's the reason behind Breaking Bad? Do you mean that we are making math?
Yeah,
well,
you're making math.
The real world math.
The real world math. You guys are like, he's like, give me a high five, and he's like, I don't know, and he's like, yeah, let's do it, and then they're excited about each other. That's how
but turns out they kind of want to kill each other, right? So this may not be the best comparison.
That's what I mean. That's what I think is funny.
You guys want to kill each other a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Jokes aside, right? I think thanks David for joining our show. I think I was literally getting goosebumps when David shared all these like big and small stories, right? How he built Ugly Dolls, right? And I think this is exactly what we want to hear on GM Show, because at the end of the day, I think in Web3, most of the media talks about floor price all the time, right? They talk about, hey, what's the next big thing all the time. But the thing is, the world doesn't really work like that, right? And there are so many, I would say, big and small growth stories. I think all those are the things that we should talk about, because that's how we can learn, right? In the Web2 startup world, people don't really talk about, okay, what is the next big funding round? I mean, they still talk about it, but as a builder, that doesn't really matter, right? Meanwhile, as a founder, I really love to see the early day, the first Series A or Series C pitch deck of PayPal. What is the growth story of Reddit, right? How did they start, right? I think all those things actually is more inspirational to me as a builder, right? That's why on the GM show, right, we want to become builders friendly, because the space, especially in Web3, is very unfriendly to builders, right? So I think this is why I literally have goosebumps when David talk about that, right? And my first question is, David, in your newsletter, you talk about there's no Asian market, right? I totally agree with that. I think when people say that Asian market, right, basically I know that there's a white guy from America, right, sure, or a white guy from Europe, right? Because it's almost like a Chinese guy say that, oh, I want to travel to Europe, right? They almost see that as a country,
for
right?
Sure.
but at the same time, even in Europe, I think it's already better because most of the people in Europe, they speak English, right? Meanwhile, in Asia, basically they speak different languages. So for David, how did you get that kind of insight? Is it because you live in Asia for a long time and your partner is Asian, right? And actually, what would be your take or your advice to founders who is like from the so-called Western culture, right? To break into the Asian market.
Sure, of course. You know, I have made the suggestion to many that they should do their best to spend some time physically just on the ground and to befriend anyone in the creative realm. Like if you're in a project that is kind of IP heavy, let's say like a Doodles, right? Where there's the potential for becoming a lifestyle centric character brand or something story driven or more animated or however they decide to go. I think I was very fortunate that I was able to spend so much time on the ground, through our initial projects in Japan. And when I say there's no Asian market, it was just because that term to me feels more like it's just said, but and not in a bad way, but it means there's a disfamiliarity with the nuance and the complexities and the opportunities. To be frank, I mean, there's an entire world that needs to be discovered, and I think if you're serious about it, that it's worth not just going for a week and staying at the Ritz where then you really miss it, or the Park Hyatt. But I always made it a point to stay at, like, when we're in Japan, I would stay at like Kamata, in Otaku, or like where no tourism, or find the most boring outskirts place and find a little hotel and be there, because you're able to observe the way your market really is, not in Shinjuku when it's all just people who got off the plane same time as you and going to Dinan de Luca, but trying to learn as much as you can about the variables in your market. And I think that that's going to be really important for Web3 founders as well, that it's not a product category, but you're coming from a birthplace the way those who came from the designer toy world had a birthplace that resulted in something like Pop Mart, right? Or, that you could become a competitor for Mattel. The Web3 founders, many of them are going to be competitors for what we think are some of the biggest companies in the world. And we're like in the dial-up days compared to, where this could head. And so it would make sense to me to spend some time not in the Asian market, but to understand why you wouldn't really want to refer to it anymore like that, and do your best to go to Seoul, go to Taipei, and where do I think I'm supposed to be? Where's my default? Like, am I going to ship everything to Toys R Us? Now let me find out why that would be a bad idea. What is the Hyundai department store, and why are these brands there doing what they're doing? Because they're not just there randomly. They're there for a reason, and they know something. And seek out those people, right? I would cold call people like ridiculously, like crazy, constantly, and 10% of them would write back and they'd meet with me, and then like 1% of them we'd end up working together. So there's a lot of learning to do, but I would say, especially with the yen versus the dollar, and even the won versus the dollar right now, it's a good time, better time than it's ever, since like.
We don't need more people in Japan. There's too many people there. Too many tourists right now.
Yeah, but don't go to Shinjuku. Go to try to seek out the places that might be breaths of fresh air for your potential tribe members. Really, like who are you trying to appeal to? And there's just so much you can learn, and you're going to end up finding your version of. It doesn't mean follow some new system and okay, I have to do what Metacom did, or I have to do what this shoe company did. That learn what they're doing and what they're choosing not to do and why, and then you're going to be able to carve your own path. And then that's far more important than just entering the market, I think.
Got it. Yeah. I think that's great insight, right? Because I mean, for the lack of a better comparison, I feel like IP or character IP, I think is kind of like a fashion brand, right? And of course, you can sell your clothes at Zara or Uniqlo. Right? It doesn't mean that it's bad. It drives sales. You probably get a good cut of a profit, right? If you have a good deal. But no matter how many clothes you sell at Zara, right? You are not a famous designer, right? And you will not have your own personal brand. It's not that easy, right? Because at the end of the day, all these, I would say, popular marketplace, they're not the place to define a brand. This is not the place where the brand was born, right? So for example, I'm pretty close with a phone case company called Casetify. Right?
Yes.
I mean, they intentionally do not sell on Amazon, right? Because selling on Amazon means that you're basically one of the many phone cases they sell there, right? So
Totally.
they build their own distribution, right? They work with a lot of, I would say, pretty niche store, right? To make sure that they show up at the place where culture was created, right? But
Yes.
not the place where culture were kind of like distributed to the masses, right? Because when you show up, I mean, that Walmart and stuff, they would still want to be there, but not at the beginning. It's almost like the last place they want, so that they can kind of like, okay, to maximize the sales channel and stuff like that. So is that what you see for the character IP business as well?
That's a great way to put it. I was just in the Casetify store in Seoul, in the Pangyo Techno Valley at the Hyundai.
Yeah,
Park
that one
store.
is a great one. I think
Standing there for like an hour. It's beautiful.
yeah,
And what you
they
said-
have built some great in-store experience. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And I had one, walking in there, like a phone case place, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. Like, it's the first time I ever felt something about, the process of purchasing a phone case. And you're absolutely right. Your comment about Walmart. I mean, yeah, you can go to Walmart. You can make a career out of shipping stuff to Walmart, and there's nothing wrong with it. And you can do quite well. Many do, right? If you can learn the ins and outs of not taking on too many returns, etc. But for building a brand, yes, I think you really nailed it on the head. I heard in a Twitter Spaces once, someone commented, look what Hello Kitty's doing with H&M. We need that. And I was begging to get on the stage, and I think too much time passed, so my message didn't really come across. But what I said was, the guy who said, we need what Hello Kitty's doing with H&M, don't do that. Do what Hello Kitty did from 1979 to 99, so that they could earn something like that where it helps them and it doesn't hurt them. Because I've seen so many new brands that are like 6 months old jump into an H&M, and H&M will work with you, because if you're poking through the attention membrane, you're on the mood board. They need to show their tribes that they're as with it as they are, that that they know, that Nike knows about you right when everyone else finds out about you, and they're working with you. That's very different than if you've been doing what you're supposed to be doing for decades, and then you really work together with Nike. That's a very different relationship. We made a Sanrio collaboration toys for Comic-Con, but then we had Sanrio Japan make our collaboration stuff in-house, and it is an entirely different thing, and we had to earn that. It wasn't just, we need to go to H&M, right? So I think learning what the difference is would be very helpful, and I think that translates through, so especially because whatever the holder dynamics are and whatever the technology dynamics will be as things evolve, the emotional connection that you have with the brand component is always going to be really important. And I think it's the earlier you form some sort of understanding around that, the better.
Yeah, I think the insight that you share, right, basically separates the noob and the expert, right? Because I think for the noob, I'm not saying that in a bad way, but more like people who don't understand the business, right? They always look at the latest thing the big company does, and then they assume that this is the way to go into the market. It's almost like a gaming company, right? For a guy who just make a game, right? They will say that, okay, we should do a TV ad, right? We should do a TV commercial, because all the big games, they're doing TV commercials, right?
Right.
But if you're really, really good game developers, you know that, okay, all those games, this is the last resort. They want to place an ad, right? It's just because they maximize all other funnels, for example, like social media, for example, like other channels, right? That's why they do it. It's the same case for Casetify, right? Right now they have awesome stores, right? But the reason is I asked Wes, right, who's the CEO, it's because it's actually cheaper to do offline stuff these days, right, than doing online marketing, activation, and stuff like that, right? So I feel like you're exactly right. We should look at how all those brands started, right?
Yes.
We should look at the garage phase instead of right now the super awesome cool office phase, right? I think this is exactly why we feel like, okay, there's a big disconnect between the community, what they want, and also what the project should be doing. Right? And I think this is also the hard part, right? Because, for example, David, you're in Web3 for some time, right? And as an experienced founder and builder and creator, right? What's the biggest challenge that you face in dealing with the Web3 community so far?
Well, we've, on one hand, I guess been fortunate that I've avoided the 10K collection component, so everything that we've done really has been one of ones or close to it. And we've kind of always had a relationship with everyone who's come in to appreciate our work, that this is really like the same as if I took our work and had a show at Giant Robot on Sawtelle Boulevard, or if I did a setup, at, wherever it is, that you're really buying artwork, and the belief is in the creator, right? That, and I would even say, like, hey, this NFT that we're making, there's going to be a show deal announced soon, and I want you to know that doesn't matter. That's not going to have any impact on this being, like, I'm not trying to rob you of potential value, right? But at the same time, I explained to them the approach that we're going to be taking with this is the approach that we've taken with everything that we've done. That everything that you see that we're doing today started 20 years ago. And if you would like to know more about where it's headed, don't look at what I'm doing right now, and don't look at press releases coming out this year, but take a look at what you saw us doing from like 2004, 5, 6, 7. And if you like what we did from there to here, that's what we hope to be able to accomplish with what we're doing in Web3. That, we see it as the dial-up version of what's coming, and that we would love to be in it for the long haul and not worry so much about the day-to-day or even the year-to-year dynamics. I think that's a slippery slope where it can literally become the culture where you just need things to happen so quickly. And I would say you need things to not happen so quickly, So like you said, looking into the history of like the pitch book for like the first couple rounds for these companies, that would be great to go through that, because you get a sense of, now I understand that I'm not looking at PayPal right now and thinking that's what I want, but without looking at how they got there in the first place and the road that they traveled. I think it's really important.
David, how about your work with the Nouns DAO? I know that they, I don't know if you have one, and then you're in this thing, or do you have to put, I understand that how the DAO works is where you have to submit like an idea and they vote on the idea if they're going to do it or not. It's like, and do you have a lot of interaction with them when you do that kind of project?
Yeah. You asked me, and then my answer was a non-answer. So when Nouns first came out, I was really excited about it because I felt like it could be potentially a disruptor for the business that I came from, right? And I love the business that I come from, and I don't want to see it destroyed, but I do feel like things that are so from right field are healthy, to get injected once in a while from what could become formulaic in the world that I come from, like, the idea of making a show and then selling a bunch of toys and T-shirts, which isn't really how it works anyway, not exactly, but that Nouns was coming from this crazy place of, it's kind of a character brand, but the character brand is just a top layer to bring you closer to this like a protocol kind of. And that was all very new to me. I mean, I was still going down the Web3 rabbit hole back 2 years ago exactly. And so I thought this could be really interesting. Also back then I thought, there's like this metaverse coming. And, I believe them that somebody's making the metaverse where it's going to be decentralized, and, Nouns is built on Ethereum, and, Ethereum is sort of censorship resistant, and shouldn't then the things that are built upon it be equally as such? So I was willing to go along with all that because it was interesting if that's really going to happen that way. So I signed up for, you can submit a proposal to Nouns, and then if they vote on it positively, then they'll fund it. So we made, these are Sofubi figures I started to tell you, right, in our Japanese factories. So we made Nouns figures in Japan at those same factories using the exact same high-grade plastics. They're painted by the same masters that we've been using for the last 20 years. And we put them into this chain of stores called Loft. There's a really, really beautiful one in Ginza. And then now they're going to be moving into the Shibuya location on the sixth floor. But the Ginza one was like one of the go-to locations for independent creators, right? A lot of these independent creators they would kind of get their start there. There's a sticker company, B-Side label, that got their start at Loft like 10, 15 years ago or something like that, where now, they're it's incredible what they've pulled off. So it's one of these touch points in culture where it's possible to sort of like break through and become a point of discovery. So we really inserted Nouns into our formula that we use for everything that we do, right? And so we'll see how it goes. The challenge with Nouns is that, I can do this and I can be very careful. And after this, I'm going to put it at Village Vanguard, the chain of crazy like tchotchke stores. It's like our Hot Topic, there's like 150 locations. So I can be very careful and do all this. The problem is somebody else can come along and just stick Noun stuff into the Aeon Mall or, Big Camera. And that wouldn't be so bad, but do you know what I mean? Like the nature, you can't really say no to anything. And so over the long term, it could present a challenge, although Nouns doesn't really exist. They're not really trying to become a character brand in the first place, right? So yeah, the whole thing is just a very interesting exercise for me to see how far I could push, doing the opposite of what I would usually do, right? Where most brands live or die by the power of no, so that we can make the correct yes and appear in the right way, so that we're a source of discovery rather than something that's being broadcast out to you. So now, but so far nobody has, gone to Walmart with Nouns or anything. I mean, that's kind of hard to do anyway, because you can literally put Nouns in Walmarts and just no one would notice them, right? That's what usually happens when you go to Walmart. So I think the whole CC0 thing is a tricky one. If you're interested in doing like SpongeBob or going up against Hello Kitty, that's probably not the path you want to take. But I think if you're interested in censorship resistant crypto, on-chain dynamics, then I think it's a fine project to explore.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge of our so-called decentralized IP, right? Because honestly, all the IPs that we know and love, they're very centralized and they get protected really, really well, right? Otherwise, I mean, just some random guy, right? They just put that character or that IP into some porn or bad movies and stuff like that, right? Then the character is destroyed, right? So somehow it's almost like decentralized IP is working against the IP itself, right?
Yes.
Because any bad actors, right, can easily ruin the whole thing, right? I think this is like a big and interesting challenge, right? When we think about IP in a decentralized way, because at the end of the day, not everything can be decentralized, right? I think some things should be centralized, right? Because that's almost like where the value is created, right? But I mean, this is like an hour talk, right? Or at least like 3 days talk, right? But before we let you go, right? I was having a chat with a friend who's his name is Pat Lee. He's a comic artist who helped draw Batman and Superman and stuff like that, right? He told me that right now, pardon?
Transformer.
Yeah, Transformer. Yes, yeah, Casey, you know it, right? We are talking to him, all right, about getting his help on Captains, right? Our main collection. So one thing that he mentioned to me is quite fascinating. Is he said that, hey Ray, these days I spend most of my time learning how to use AI art, right? Because he believes that all the new tech will transform the creator industry. We will transform the creator economy, right? And for David, right, I think for you hop on with nouns and then with Web3, right? It's almost the same philosophy, right? I really appreciate this kind of growth mindset, even though you are like an OG creators, right? So to you, before we end the show, right, what is your advice to any of your, I would say, peer who is like semi-successful or really successful in Web 2 or in the pre-Web 3 world? What would be your advice to them regarding all the new tech, all the new awesome stuff are happening these days?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I've had many Zoom calls with, my friends who are like top authors in the children's book world, all the way to like designers at Mattel and Hasbro, or filmmakers and directors and producers. And I've become kind of like one of the go-to guys, at least in the short term, for like, because they see me doing these ridiculous things, and like, what is that? And yeah, I strongly suggest that they at least learn about the various dynamics, so that you may see an opportunity for yourself, right? You may brush it. It's easy to say, oh, AI, that's gonna, I'm a real artist and I'm always going to do everything by hand, but I'm talking to you on a screen that I was just drawing on earlier today, right? I'm not using so much paper as I used to. I fill in my illustrations with the Photoshop paint bucket instead of painting it, right? So if you look at these things as other potential tools, I think it makes it a little more approachable. And yeah, I've suggested to all of them to at least look at it as a potential tool, and they're looking at the equivalent of the first version of Photoshop, right? Which you have to imagine that think about where it's headed. It's not necessarily headed into the doomsday scenario that that the news gets a lot of ad clicks on by saying so, right? That these could become quite useful tools, right? I have a Sony camera that supposedly uses AI in its autofocusing, right? My pictures still look terrible. So the camera's got the AI. I haven't really benefited from it, but I found it fascinating that that's not the application that I was thinking of. I was thinking, oh, I'm not going to make money anymore. Like, but there's other applications that we just haven't thought of. But being aware of these things, I think, is can only be a good thing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Casey.
Amazing. David, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. I think you've given us a lot to think about. Karen?
Of course.
It's amazing. I love how we're talking about like the collide of two worlds, like NFT and IPs. And I think we've learned a lot from all the IP genius here today. Yeah.
Great. So if you want to learn more about David, I highly recommend. I've subscribed to it for ages. DavidHorath.substack.com. Definitely check that out. And then he tweets out the small, shorter bits that lead back to it. So you might as well just go to the Substack and read directly from it. David, we hope to see you in Hong Kong or maybe Tokyo. It seems like more likely, or Seoul in the future. But thanks a lot. We will definitely want you to back on the show, talk more about whatever you're working on next.
We could talk about for hours.
We can just go for an hour, but we thought we better end it here. Back to your night.
Great pleasure to be able to speak with all three of you, and some really great ideas tonight. Really. So thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye, David. See ya.
Bye, David.
Everybody.
So what do you think, Ray? Is that I mean, yeah, it seems like this is I thought I'd bring on David because I know he knows a lot about Web3, as well as he's the OG creator as well. So I think that it was interesting because it's a different kind of discussion. And, I can see he's talking about Web3, but he's not saying it. But also I feel like he's like a dose of reality to a lot of these projects that are out there. And I think that's something that they...
Yeah, like 20 years of building a brand. I think like we learned a lot, like as a company, as a project that's only started.
Yeah, people think it takes 20 days to build a brand.
Exactly. And the expectation is so different. Like, I mean, it takes years of like, I love how he's like, saying the right yes, like
and saying no all the time. Yeah.
1 week is too much for everybody, but like when we need to make the right decision, it doesn't, it requires more than a week or months to do. So I think like that's what I think Ray has a lot to rant about the community pushing us like on the edge. But I think like when we're building a brand, like it really takes a lot of time.
You're muted, Ray.
You're mute.
I think it's fascinating, right? Because I think at the end of the day, we should admire all those OG creators, right? Who have already made it, and they still try to learn new things, right? In Web3, in AI, in all kind of new tech, right? I think those people are probably the one that actually push the world forward, right? To push the boundary, right? Because I mean, it's easy for a young kid, right, to learn new things, because to them, this is the only way that they can make it, right? Because to be honest, right, doing this, joining the old world, I think they will just become a part of it. They will never become a leader of it. I mean, it will be really, really hard for that to happen. Right? But at the same time, for any, I would say, more mature creators who embrace the new tech, I think that part we should give them, I would say, more support, right? Than we are giving to them right now. Because I think at the end of the day, maybe the first collection that they launch will not be successful. Or maybe the approach that they did will be seen as a bad move. But by doing that, they're actually opening the door, right, for people who wants to learn more, right?
Yeah.
For example, when we are talking to fashion brand right now for the Captain's Trades, the easiest brand that we can talk to is the one who has already started some Web3 initiative, right? Because to them, they know that, okay, this is inevitable, right? And at the same time, they also know that it's super hard to do pure Web3 thing. So they're willing to work with the Web3 team, the Web3 founders, right? It's almost like, okay, if it's not David, right, who tried Web3 and understand how hard it is, it's really hard for all the existing big brands, right, to work with a Web3 team, right? Because to them, okay, those guys are like irrelevant, right? But with some, I would say, middleman, somehow they will go to David to ask, okay, do you think that, Captains is a good collection, right? Do you think that, we should work with Cool Cats? They need some guy who understand the new world better than they do, but at the same time, who are also bullish on the new world, right? Otherwise, the comment will be, okay, this is just bullshit, right? This will be gone in 2 years, right? So I think we need more Davids. Yeah. And I'm really, really glad to have this episode, because people in Web3, there are two things that they talk a lot. Number one is IP building, right? Almost like all the brands who don't really have a product, they talk about they're building Web3 IPs, right? But right now, we actually have an IP builder who make it, right, globally, to share with us their insight, right? I mean, when all the brands, they talk about, all the Web3 teams, they talk about, okay, I want to have a show, make an animation, right? Hey, David has already have a few shows, right? Tons of shows on Nickelodeon, right? And and also in Japan, right? In Japan, in Korea, right? I think that part is actually very, very amazing when I hear about that, right? That number one is IP. Number two is of course is a token or any tokenization, stuff like that, right? And I think all those things are something that we need more, I would say, intersection or the collide, or as Karen mentioned, the collide of our two worlds. That's how we can learn the fastest. Yeah, and of course, for Will, right, when he talks about the fun parts and his experience in events, I think all these things, maybe it sounds not very like profitable at the beginning, right, from the NFT degen standpoint.
Yeah.
But down the road, I think we can't just keep selling promises, right? We actually have to have some real use cases. And those experience and those are the products, right, that we should be building right now, so that when the next bull run comes, people finally see that, okay, there are more than bullshit, right, in NFT, right? So I think, really happy to have these guests on our show, so that we give another perspective to the audience. Yeah, and I think that is actually more important in the long run.
Yeah, I think it's also important for all the projects that are here to stay. Like, this is not just a year or two kind of project. It's like maybe a lifelong thing. You never know. Maybe your grandkids will be buying your product or your IP. you know?
That's
Yeah, and
that's
I
what
think
this whole thing is about too, is building those evergreen brands, right? He's saying even like Ninja Turtles is now getting into that, but Ninja Turtles has been around for 40 years already.
Yeah.
But it's getting
Yeah.
to that level where it's always going to be there, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think this is why we want GM show, right? Because at the end of the day, we want people who listen to our show, like 2 years later, they still find it insightful, right? That's our goal, right? Because all the trade talks, they become irrelevant the next day, right? It's
Right.
almost like news, right? News is almost irrelevant the next
Yeah.
day, right? But the stuff that we talk about a year later, 2 years later, right? Hopefully there will still be some insights, right, for the listener. And
Yeah.
and actually, this is what's lacking in the space because we are so news driven, right? And the thing is, most news doesn't even matter after 2 weeks, right? So I think yeah, we are happy to invite more builders and creators, right, and to share with us their insight and also the struggle, right, in Web 2 and Web 3, right? I think yeah, thank you, Casey, for inviting David and Will to our show. Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
If you're
We'll
listening
definitely have
on
more people.
Spotify, if you're listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts 2 years from now, we hope that this is still relevant.
Exactly. Evergreen content, right? That's what we want to do. I think Ray's right. We don't want to have news. We want content that people can listen to, like almost like a lecture about how to build these brands and what's going on in the space. All right. All right. Thanks, Ray. We'll see you next week. It's been great to have you here. Great insight. Karen, we don't have anything else, right? That's it.
That's it. This is a really action-packed show. We're overrun.
Overrun so long. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know. Let us know. Do you like these longer shows? Do you want shorter shows? We don't know. I like to put like a shorter segment at the beginning and then a longer interview and then have Ray come in at the end and we just do a little discussion. So it's like 4 segments to the whole show. This one ran longer because there's a lot more questions we have for the guest. He's a wealth of knowledge rather than just talking about like a specific like a project. So let us know. I know there's a lot of requests for more working in Web3 projects. So we're looking for guests that are like in HR or hiring and things like that. So kind of walk us through that. And I think I found a couple of interesting people to come on for that. But let us know, let us know in the comments of the streams or the Twitter spaces. Yeah, what you're looking at, what you're interested in learning more about. I'm glad Ray enjoyed that talk because yeah, there's only so many exactly. Most of the Web3 guys we have on, the stuff is either it's changing like tomorrow, right? So we got to find people who are actually building stuff out. So I have a lot of good ideas for other people to bring on the show in the future.
We need guest lecturers.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I guess that's it, right?
That's a wrap.
So we'll see you next week. Same time, same channel. It's going to be next week with another. We have our guest already lined up. But stay tuned to Twitter, GM Show Official, to find out who it is. And I'm sure the show will be up on Spotify and Apple Podcasts early next week. Have a great rest of your day, Karen, and everybody listening.
Great.
It's getting dark here.